Hey folks, if you started working as a designer, then you probably and very quickly realized that it's not that easy to get your designs through to implementation. You may have designed what you believed was the best solution with the full set of features, but maybe the team was only able to implement the small, very small, sometimes an awkward fraction of your design. Or maybe no one saw the problem the way you did, so you didn't even get to design it the way you believed you should. And I get it. This can be frustrating, this can be annoying, disappointing, and sometimes it might even drive you to low-grade rage. If you identified with anything that I just shared, then this video is for you. In fact, many of you actually voted for this video, and it's true. This is the perennial problem of being a designer. I still experience it, and it's a work in progress, but I've definitely gotten better with it. And over the years, I've developed my own methods and strategies, and I wanted to share this toolkit with you so that you can design better and be a better designer. This video is going to be more of a masterclass for those who have started working as a designer. If you are just interested in design or just trying to get into design, then I'm not so sure that this video is going to be the right video for you. But who am I? If you're interested, go ahead and watch it. I just wanted to be upfront and give everyone a heads up. We're going to get a bit nerdy about this. We're going to get into the weeds, and there's a lot to cover. So let's get into it. Let's first get clear on the problem. It may feel like they just don't get it, that I'm right, they're wrong. They just need to come around. If they just were able to understand what design is, maybe they'll just get it. Maybe the product will be better if I just took control. Look, I think emotionally, I've felt this way too. However, in reality, I don't think it has been my experience that that's the case. I actually think the issue is that everyone is actually partially right. Look, you're going to be working cross-functionally. It's most likely going to be you, the designer, a product manager, and someone from the engineering side, probably a tech lead, that make up the core problem-solving group. Now consider, you're most likely not going to be the only feature team or product team a part of the company. There's probably going to be other teams, and all the different teams probably have to work well together because there's probably dependencies across the different teams. But not only that, depending on the project, you may have to go broader and work with other departments across the entire company, which may include, but not limited to, sales, finance, legal, operations. You may have subject matter experts, whether they be internal or external to the company, marketing, customer success, data folks. If you have data folks, for sure, you have to work with them. Test engineers, if you have them, to make sure that the product is, being released well. And my point is, there's all these different roles that you're going to have to work with. And inherently, because of their role, they're going to think about the problems differently. Not only that, it's very likely that each of these roles think about success differently. So this is just very ripe for miscommunication and misalignment. When you're trying to solve a problem, you need to be on the same page about what the problem is and how you're going to solve it. So that becomes a lot of the work as a designer. So given the situation, how can designers, you and I, be better collaborators and contributors towards meaningful and impactful product outcomes? We're going to cover 5 methods and strategies in this video. Number 1 is rally around the same risks. So when you're designing and building product, every decision that you make is going to carry some amount of risk. And in Marty Kagan's book, Inspired, he explicitly calls out 4 major risk categories. And I've been using his framework for years now, and anecdotally, it has been so helpful for my day-to-day work, not only actual designing piece of it, but in influencing and communicating and collaborating. All right, so take a look here. Here are the 4 risk categories. I'm not going to go into real detail here. I highly recommend that you check out the book Inspired by Marty Kagan. He does a great job of explaining these and going into detail and breaking everything down. But for the purpose of this video, and just also the way I communicate this in meetings and in presentations, I'm going to do it that way just to make it easy. So let's go bottom up. Usability risk. This is about if the user can actually figure out what you designed or built. Pretty straightforward, right? This is kind of in the wheelhouse of designers. Now, feasibility risk is more about capabilities. Can the builders, engineers actually make it, code it, build it? Business risk. Can the business work with it? I know that's a little bit vague, but typically it deals with like legal, financial, maybe there's some regulatory or compliance thing going on. And the most important probably is going to be value risk. So even if everything else checks out and you design it and build it and put it out into the world, will the users actually really buy it? or will they actually use it if you make it for them? And it's helpful to know that these are all related. They're not mutually exclusive. So there's going to be overlaps. Also, if you change one or you adjust anything, it may impact some other risk category. So the problem I want to point out here is that early on I had this issue, and I see junior designers having this issue, and it's that we focus too much on the usability risk. Now, I'm not saying don't focus on it, because it's important. It's part of the equation. But you can imagine other roles prioritizing and really thinking more about the other types of risks. Now, this creates an issue when you're trying to get on the same page about what the problem is and how you're going to solve it. So here's what I would suggest, and this is something that I've practiced over the years and I'm still working on. So number one, speak to the other types of risks. Practice it. Try to see if you can understand what a business risk is for your company, what is a value risk for your product, or what is a feasibility risk for the engineers that you work with. And see if you can start practicing speaking to it intelligently and speaking in a language that they will understand. If you talk design jargon, for feasibility risk, it probably won't be as effective. And if you start talking design stuff to business stakeholders in the way you may talk to other designers, that's probably not going to be effective either. So you want to start practicing like speaking in a way that other people will understand. And that leads me to tip number 2. Try to figure out what types of risk is most important to what type of role. So let's just take a product manager, for example, because they probably care about a lot of the risks that you care about. However, given a certain situation, stakeholder situation, or the budget or timeline, certain other types of risk might be prioritized over usability. Now you need to be able to speak to that and also be able to speak to how your usability risk is an important factor or an overlap to everything else going on. Now, that leads me to tip number 3. There's not going to be just one risk that the team cares about. It's going to be a mix of risks and in different priority depending on the project. It's your job to try to figure out what that is and be able to get the whole team to speak about the risk in the same way. I found it to be the best way to get the team aligned on the same page about what the problem is and how you're going to try to solve it. And even then, it's still difficult, but I found that this makes it way, way easier and it's pretty effective. Number 2, align on a future vision. And designers, I think this one may sting a little bit, but hear me out. No one intentionally sets out to make a product with terrible UX. It happens because there's real pressure to meet business outcomes, and in those situations, usability things can typically get overlooked, or it's very easy to overlook them. Especially with the iterative nature of design and building these days, it's, even for designers, I think, it's hard to see what the big deal is of using an off-brand color, or just rearranging things to squeeze stuff in, or just placing a button slightly somewhere else just to get the job done. But you and I know that those things compound over time, and the effects of it, the negative effects of it, it'll show in the medium to long term. But the here and now, it may not make a major difference and it may seem completely fine. Look, so it's easier to see the impact of the smaller UX decisions if you place it in context of a more holistic and longer term vision. And you can use your design skills to kind of draw that up and help people see what you're talking about, because typically non-designer roles, they probably have a hard time imagining what you're seeing. As designers, it may be easier for us and more natural to be able to piece things together and imagine what things could be, but that's not true for a lot of other roles. So this is where you can really be proactive and help drive alignment and strategy for the product and project that you're working on. The other thing I'll mention is that then the usability risks become way more apparent when you're able to see the small little decisions and the impact of it in a future state. So oftentimes, showing people what a decision may become is extremely, extremely powerful. This is also going to be helpful for you as a designer, because this is sort of playing chess with the future state of the product or feature that you may be working on. So what I mean by this is the decision that you would make here and now just to solve the problem right now will likely be very different from a decision you would make to set yourself up to have the product become something else in the future. So by doing this exercise and having that holistic vision, the North Star of where you're trying to go, it's way easier to figure out what types of decisions you need to make sure that you have so that you set yourself up well. Number 3, principles over pixels. And designers, I think this is going to sting way more, but hear me out because I really think this one's going to be helpful. So amongst designers, it's really helpful to talk about pixels. It's rather productive and fun to do so. Iconography, typography, rounded corners, placement of things. Is someone going to be confused about it? How do they feel about it? Will they know how to use it if I design it? That sort of thing. And that's all important. But in a cross-functional setting, it's probably not going to be effective if you harp too hard on those things. It's because when it comes to actually solving a problem for, the product, the feature for the business, it's going to be way broader than just the usability risk. So keep the pixels in mind for sure, but when you're working cross-functionally, you want to be flexible with the solution, anchor hard on the principles, like core concepts, mental models that you really cannot mess up, because if you do mess up on those things, it changes the whole purpose of the solution, because that's going to really determine the outcome of, whatever solution you're working on. So let's use a non-digital example to illustrate what I'm talking about here. So if you're creating a menu for a local diner, you might think of adding classic American breakfast items and staple lunch sandwiches. But you probably wouldn't consider adding in a section for sushi just because your cook used to work at a sushi restaurant, or because you know that sushi probably you could charge more and make more money from, because it just doesn't fit with the whole idea of what a diner is. No way. But maybe you can agree to disagree on the color of the menu or the typography and how it folds and the material that you use, because that doesn't take away from the main purpose of what you're trying to do. So that's what I really mean when I say principles over pixels. Number 4, think in systems and set precedents. It's very natural for us to really just focus on the here and now and the problem that we're given. And as makers and doers, as craft people, I know we want to sweat the details for every single problem that comes our way. But I would argue that for an evolving digital product, the impact on the product is really defined by the collection or the package of solutions that you design versus it being defined by any single solution that you've created. So this is a nudge for us to maybe let go of our grip on, perfecting every single detail for every single problem, but thinking a little bigger and more systematically, and thinking about for any project that we're working on to consider all the related problems and see if we could come up with a solution that addresses some or all of the overlaps. Let's run through an example to better illustrate this. So let's take IKEA, for example. So you could have a designer just create one single storage bin, right? And it probably would be a very good storage bin. It would get the job done. However, compare that to having a whole system of storage, thinking about it as a whole collection of different types of bins, and then designing a bin for that system. And you can see the benefits of it immediately. So first, for you as a designer, you're creating the system, so you're creating like a cohesive user experience where all these different parts can now work well together. The customer is going to benefit because they're going to probably have something more cohesive and uniform for their home. And the business will probably benefit because instead of selling one storage bin, you could sell a whole system of them. Hope that makes sense. Now, before we move on, I know this is still probably a bit nebulous, so I'll just run through a couple of questions that I ask myself as I'm trying to think this way and train myself to think this way. So whenever I'm working on anything, I'll ask, what are the related problems and how does my design impact them? Or, how long will this feature be around after I design it? What are the chances that, I may need to actually remove it? And what are the chances that another part of the product is gonna need or benefit from the same exact thing that I'm making right now? Number 5, always present more than one possibility. There is no way that you're gonna control other people's perception of your work or that you're gonna have absolute control over the precise solution that gets implemented. What you do have complete control over, though, is your thought process and how you articulate that to other people. And you wanna anchor hard into what you can control. So over time, I've gotten in the habit of always presenting a set of solutions, then walking the teams through the pros and cons of each option, as well as the essence of how each option is going to solve the particular problem. And anecdotally, this has just always led to better design and product outcomes, although it definitely takes more work and you kind of have to let go of a lot of things that you probably hold near and dear and just trust that the team is going to make better decisions this way. And it's just better for brainstorming. It invites people into your design process. People are more engaged. It's just better for cross-functional collaboration, which is really at the core of good problem solving. To help you get started, below are some questions that you can ask yourself as you try to come up with a set of solutions. So let's start with the top one. What if we integrated with another tool instead of like building and designing something of our own? What would that look like? What would be the easiest for us to build versus what would be the fastest thing for us to build? What would be the simplest experience for the user, like the absolute best? And what would set us up better for a future vision of the product? And typically, like 3 options is usually good. For some reason, anything beyond 3, I notice that people, get overwhelmed. And often what you want to do is have 2 like polar opposites and then one that kind of sits in between. What I mean by that is like 2 very, very different options and then one that kind of cuts the difference between the 2. Here's a bonus plug for this method, and this is a major, major benefit. If you can do this for an extended period of time with the same team, then the design standard of everyone on that team is going to be elevated. And it's going to make collaboration easier, it's going to make the product better, and it's because through this, everyone is practicing how to think about design and understanding what better design is. And it's just a deeply influential way to do things. And of course, it takes more work, right? And it's going to take time, but I think this is really a powerful way to do things. So there you have it. Those are my 5 methods and strategies. Those are literally just everything in my toolkit. I am hiding nothing from you. I'm just laying it bare, hoping it helps you design better and be a better designer. And please leave comments and let me know if it's working for you. If it's not, if you want me to go into more detail, I am more than happy to do that. Just let me know. And hey, like and subscribe and share it with someone else, who it might benefit. And I guess I'll see you guys in the next one.